financial. I think we'll dive into that, I'm sure, knowing your background and what you would say to my younger self around financial. You definitely relationship, and I would say also, I think those three actually. I didn't pick career mostly because I feel like the career is usually an expression of the mindset you have and the financial goals that you're trying to strive for. I would talk about physical too. I would actually, talk, because I'm way fitter now at 47 years old than at any point in my life. And I kind of wish I had this physique, the mobility, the strength, and the will when I was in 20, man. Tip top shit. Because I know I can't grow muscles and be strong at 47 compared to what I did back in my 20s. But if I wish I kind of would have gone back to kind of focus a little bit more on that. When you introduced this topic to me the other day, I just loved it. Bam, heart it right away. I'm like, this is gold. Jim, I'd love you to introduce this week's topic because, I think it's going to be a fun topic to discuss.
Well, I had the idea that we could write a letter or communicate a letter to our younger self. So with the advantage and the wisdom and the experience of time and maturity, if we could be teleported back to a certain age, what would we say? If anybody's watched the Back to the Future trilogy, which is one of my favorite trilogies, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's effectively about time travel, and where you're going back in time and forward in time, and I just had this idea that what would I say to myself if I could meet myself in the street in a much younger version, knowing how life's panned out to help me through some of those challenging times.
I'd say invest in Tesla. No, just okay. No, there's a company that's coming up right now that it's not going to be around for another 10 more years. But
if we had that sporting almanac from
that's right. That's
what I want. That's what I want, man. I just
place your bets on this one. Don't bother with this team. Just all right. In all seriousness, I think this is a great question. I think it's if you had to write a letter to your younger self, what would you put in that letter? I'll let you start, Jim. What's the first kind of these are on I'm sure this can be random order, but what do you think is one of the most important elements? Okay, actually, before you tell us exactly about the content, let's kind of describe what kind of frame of mind do you need to what are you thinking about before you write this letter? Like how's the mindset? What's the concept? What are the content? Let's talk about that piece and before we actually get into the exact content.
Sure. Well, I think I sat with, what would be the age group that you're talking about? And that if you're writing it to yourself, you could pick a hypothetical age for yourself. But for me, it would be, I think, for me, if I was writing this letter to the younger self, it would be just at the point where I graduated from chiropractic. I'm just about to take on the world, metaphorically speaking. I've got a whole career ahead of us. We've got Bettina and I. We don't have kids. We've got a blank canvas and the world is our oyster.
Yeah. For context, how old were you then?
I would have been 23.
Okay. So this is really good. I think, maybe we can go into this in this podcast. It's maybe pick 2, maybe 3, if that's too much, of what you would say in the different age group. Because I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So for context, I didn't graduate till 27.
Yep.
So, which is, 4 years later, I think, what I would tell myself at 23 versus 27 is probably 2 different things.
Actually, I'm corrected. 25. Sorry, because I forgot I was 25. I apologize. I did.
You failed a couple of years, right?
Yeah. I detoured to do a science course for a couple of years. I loved it. So 25 rather than 27 or 23. So 25.
The reason why people are asking me why did you graduate 27? Because I failed 4 years. No, I'm just joking. I had to do a 4-year degree before I went to chiropractic college, so I had 2 degrees. That's why. So I think let's pick 2 stages. Okay,
25,
let's pick 2 stages.
25.
I think around 25, mid 20s. Mid 20s.
Yep.
And then the other younger self I think would be worthwhile talking about is probably in your teens. I would say around 17, just before adulthood.
Yep. Great.
Just maybe at the end of high school. I think that would probably be a good time. All right, so let's choose those 2. Okay, great. So that's good. So the first thing that we would consider is okay, which younger self do we actually want to make influence? Actually, let's ask you this while we talk about this. Which one, if you had to choose only one, right? Either like the 17-year-old's version or like the mid-20 version. Which one, if you can only choose one, which one would you choose? And that would make the bigger impact in the life trajectory, do you think?
Look, I think going back to 16, 17 would be the case, because I'd have to have gone through 16 to get to 25. And if I can basically instill that wisdom there, the earlier, then like it's probably, for simplicity, I'd probably just go, listen, I'm just going to talk to that version of myself, because if he takes on that wisdom, then hopefully at 25 he's picked it up anyway. So,
interesting.
I'd go. What about you?
I was just sitting there as I asked you that question. Yeah, the logical answer is that, but I think I'm going to choose the other one. Yeah. Just to kind of, add some content here. But the reason why I would choose the other one is because, and this is context for me only, okay? Because obviously at that age, at 17, 18, I was just on this path of just academic knowledge. I kind of just wanted to study. Whereas when I was graduating at 27, like, all the study's done. I've just literally spent, how did I calculate this? 22 years straight of education. I didn't stop, went straight, didn't take any time off, didn't have one of those, gap years or anything. I went 22 years of straight studying, and now I get to live my life in a way. Yeah. And I think the greatest influence was that moment. And the reason why I would say that is because that was also the moment when I decided to leave Canada and go to Australia.
Right.
And that changed the trajectory of my life. So I think if I was to give that advice, to make sure guiding that for me would be more helpful, knowing that I was already going to go through the university path anyway. Yeah. So
okay.
I'm scared that if I did say what I'm going to say to my 17-year-olds, that they might not actually gone through the university path.
100%, because that's the first question that goes to me, is like, okay, would the 16 to 17-year-old version of myself taken that advice on, or would I just been, thanks, man, I got this covered, thanks anyway, mate.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, I don't know if they would have actually listened, and I don't know if I had the maturity at that time to absorb the information. And
so we're going to hypothetically look at this and say, assuming that you just happen to have this conversation and the 16 or the 25-year-old version of you was open and receptive to take information on.
Yes.
What would we do, say, or what we communicate? Because there are a lot of assumptions, so we just got to we've got to basically, as you said, put context around that and just give it something.
So what would you like? What would be the big areas that you would want to cover without going into the content just yet? Like, what are the areas that you think will make the most influence?
So the biggest part, whenever we work with people in a coaching capacity, we always look at different areas of life, and so you'll look at health, relationship, wealth, career, friendships, all those kind of things. And so to me, I'd want to be able to cover at least some guidance around that sphere. 7 areas, we do 24 areas when we look at things instead, but at least 7 areas of life that I'd love to be able to assist and help out. So that to me would be the key part of it. And if you could dissect it down to 1 or 2, it'd be, I guess, the ones that mean the most to me, have been my biggest learnings over life. I'd hopefully be able to translate that. And that'd be around relationship, that would be around career, and that would also be around my, character and identity. That would be probably the 3 big areas that I'd focus on.
Interesting. I think for me would be, if I had to narrow it down, I couldn't narrow it down to one. I was going to ask you, like, what's the one thing?
You can't. I was struggling.
Yeah. Like, for me, it would be mindset. I think having the right mindset and approach to life, if I had to choose one, it would be that, simply because I feel like the mindset of having the right mindset would really change, will actually be the one core element that is consistent across your physical mentality, your financial mentality, your career mentalities and things. So I have to choose one, building a strong mindset, like a mindset of abundance, or a mindset of just like strength and tenacity and discipline, all those things. I think that would be the one thing I have to choose. But that's one area. The second area I think will be financial. I think we'll dive into that, I'm sure, knowing your background, just the financial, what you would say to that, to my younger self around financial. Definitely relationship. And I would say also, I think those 3 actually. I didn't pick career mostly because I feel like the career is usually an expression of the mindset you have and the financial goals that you're trying to strive for. Relationship, ethic, physical. I would talk about physical too. Like I would actually, talk, because I'm way fitter now at
Yeah.
47 years old than at any point in my life. And
That's awesome.
I kind of wish I had this physique, the mobility, the strength, and the will at when I was in 20. Man, I would have
Yeah.
been tip top shit.
Yeah.
Because I know I can't grow muscles
Yeah.
and be strong at 47 compared to what I did back in my 20s. But yeah, if I wish I kind of would have gone back to kind of focus a little bit more on that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So let's start with those. So, did you want to ask me that question again? Because I've forgotten what you.
Sure. Let's start with let's talk about mindset first. I think that's
Okay.
one a crucial thing. I think what kind of lessons what would you put in that letter around mindset do you think will be key to your younger self?
So at around the 16, 17, I was, I was in a professional athlete mindset. I was training 7 days a week, 7 days a week with my martial arts, football and the whole like. And so I had a very strong mindset, very disciplined mindset that propelled me and helped me achieve some phenomenal things very early on. What I probably have learned over time is that it was probably, and I've developed, is more of a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, because I was so focused on this. It was either you win or you lose. And I was so locked on to an outcome that I couldn't understand the difference between progressive improvement or excellence as opposed to perfectionism. And that created a lot of stress, a lot of, I loaded the bases on myself. And to me, that, like I said to you, that worked exceptionally well up until the point I realized it was an unsustainable model. So I wish I could go back and get clearer on using the elements that served me well and also adopt more of a growth mindset. So it's a case of going, hey, okay, that setback, that doesn't define you. That's not the be all and end all. That's not just because you lost or took a hit here does not mean that this is how that will be. So how do you use this? And I eventually developed that, which was really great. But yeah, the earlier I would have known that, the better.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like we have a tendency to, I don't know, it's a young thing, but I'm sure a lot of people do that too. But we kind of make one small thing so much bigger than it actually is when we're younger. Like I see that with my daughter, and it's like she just takes one test. It's like, oh, it's the end of the world. But I got to remind myself, like, she's only been on this earth for 14 years, so it is a big deal for her. But we have a bit more years under our belt. That test in university that I might have failed really doesn't mean that much, you know what I mean? But at the time, it felt like it was the worst thing in the world. So I definitely get that. For me, it's actually, I would definitely tell my younger self about, actually at any age, would be to take more risk. And the reason why, for context, was I was not a risky person at all. I didn't take any risk whatsoever. I didn't take chances in life. I didn't take many opportunities. I was scared. I was scared. I told the line. I didn't jump at opportunities. I still remember a story. I remember when I was a kid. I can't remember how old I was. I'm probably about 11 or 12 years old. I remember there was like a fire truck, and my parents were showing me this fire truck, and there was like, the firemen were out there, and the fireman's like, hey, do you want to come in? Why don't you jump in? And I remember saying, no, thank you. I was scared. And, I look back at that and I was like, man, like, kid, come on. Like, you got this opportunity. Like, why don't you take it? Like, it's silly. But that was me at the time, like those opportunities just were like, there was tons of those like examples in my life that I just never took. And, but then again, if you look at my life now, I probably, compensate for a lot of those things, jumping opportunities. And this is why, in hindsight, when you look back it's in my life, in your career, and it's like, yeah, I definitely take a lot of big swings in my life. And I think it's because of that thing that I felt lack of when I was younger. So, but yeah, take more risk. And, because I think, you and I both agree that when you're younger, those risks when you fail, they're actually great learning lessons and they don't break you, as much as it would if you're a little older.
Yeah. Look, thank you for sharing that too, because that's, I guess what we're also doing is, this is a vulnerable process for both of us to suddenly go, oh man, I'm going back to a point where, okay, you're seeing now the more mature, more polished, more experienced version of me, but that wasn't always the case. We're a work in progress, and we still are. Mm-hmm. So for you to share that, I really felt great connection and empathy to you as you were sharing that story. So the curious part of me just said, so when did it switch? What was the defining moment where you said, I can't keep doing this way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I didn't. There was not one singular moment. It all started with like small little things,
Yeah.
right? It's like, I think one of them would have been probably going to university. And, in Canada, we tend to go to, we have University of Toronto, and there's about 2 or 3 universities actually in Toronto where I'm from. But I got a scholarship, $1,000. And I took that one because over another school, because they gave me $1,000. I'm like, all right, I'm going to that one. I went to the University of Waterloo, which was about an hour drive, but I had to live away from home. And, but at 18, going away and living away from home, honestly, was the best thing that I ever did to my life. Like, it taught me to be an adult, like right off the bat. And, for me, although like as being a father now, you kind of look at your kids and like, oh man, I hope they never go away.
Yep.
But at the same time, I just know that was the best moment of my life, and I had to let them go. Like that would literally change my life. And my wife would agree with me, with her life too as well. And living away from home is honestly the best experience you kind of need at that age to kind of grow up.
Yeah.
And so I think that was like that kind of making like a decision like that, and then experiencing it and go, oh, okay, like I can, it's not that bad. And then doing more and more and more of it. Obviously, you get to a point of, choosing your partner. I met Karen at 21, and like, the things that I had to go through to win a date over her for her, like things like that, taking chances, and those things, like they add up, and you put rings on your belts. It's like, it's just like jiu-jitsu or martial arts, like, or, weights. You're like, the more you try it, the more you fail, but you start to have a bit more confidence in something, and you just get better at it. And then you take big swings, like, let's go to Australia. Boom, and then that changes your trajectory of your life. And then, I think so it's not any moment in time to answer your question, but it's a gradual moment, and it's small little decisions. They all add up. So I think this is really good, because I think, for anyone watching and listening, it's like, take some swing. It doesn't have to be the biggest swing in the world. You don't have to go from like zero to hero in a moment. It's like, take minor swings, because those little decisions that you make, realizing that it's not that big of a deal, and it's okay to make those small little moments.
And that's
count.
and that's the whole essence of the book Atomic Habits. Little habits that build momentum, and then basically they get bigger and bigger, and they have great impact over time. It's the same thing with decisions. It's the same thing with leaning into your courage, doing something scary every day or whatever that is, builds that fortitude within you to say, I've got this covered. I'm a person who makes these decisions, and after time that becomes so locked into your identity that becomes the norm.
Yeah, and I think it's also that like the decisions are based, like, remember how big of a risk, because we're talking about risk, is really relative to your risk level.
Yeah.
So, it's not that important about what I did to make those. It's more about like, what is scary for you to take the next risk, like to make the next decision that's risky for you. I think that's the most important, because I mean, we know people that are just, they're just like, they're taking big swings, but they didn't get there just like that, right? Most of the time they've got there because they've been able to put themselves in positions they know. And I think that's why I think it's important for us to kind of pull back and just go realize the risk is always relative to you and what you've done in the past. Our goal is always to grow, so which means just to, take the risk just above where you need to be.
Yeah, and also there's a big distinction between risk and recklessness as well. So it's all well and good. I mean, we know someone mutually who jumps out of perfectly good planes, and most people would go, oh my gosh, I can't imagine doing that. But the due diligence that goes into that process mitigates the risks. So it's the same thing. You don't take a step, you don't invest somewhere, at least if you're sophisticated over time, without doing due diligence.
Well, I have a saying, it's 3 things, which is fail fast. Like, we can understand that, which make mistakes, take risk faster. Fail forward. So anytime you're going to fail, like, at least make sure you fail forward in a way that you're going to learn from it, so you're not going backwards in life. And fail firm.
Yep.
And meaning that if you're going to fail, you better land with your, with your feet intact and your body intact, because you need to be able to live another day to fight and play the game. Don't fail where you're going to die.
Yep.
Risk yourself where, you're going to lose everything, and then it's game over. Like, that's not the point.
Yep.
You got to think like a video game where you're willing, like it's the same thing. In video games, you're willing to take certain risk because you're going to come back.
There's no repercussions, right? There's no effect. It's like, yeah, that's man, right. Of course I'll jump out of this. Of course I'll do that.
Exactly. So therefore, like, you should attack life like that, but know that you should only take risks that you know that you can come back from, not things that you're gonna. And this is the story I to relate back to this, which was, have you watched Free Solo with he climbed El Capitan? So Alex Honnold, one of the greatest free climbers in the world. Oh man, it's a sensational film. And it's a documentary. He basically is the first man, I think, or the quickest man who free soloed Mount Capitan in San Francisco and Yosemite Park. And free solo means like no ropes.
Yeah,
free climb. Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? And mountain climbers are always fascinating. I know I don't mountain climb myself, but it's like these climbers, free solo, no ropes. And there's a moment in that film, and I learned this from someone else before, which is like they climb, and then you get to a point, everybody has to make a jump, right? There's certain points you just have to take a leap of faith. You have to leap at it. There's no way you can climb it. And there's every moment of a climber just goes, okay, I'm gonna have to take a leap, and they go, nope, not today, and they come back down.
Yep.
Right? They got up there and they came back down. And the reason why they do that is because they know if they make the leap and they don't feel it and they miss it, that's game over. It's done. There are no tomorrows. Yeah. Right? They rather go, because they're smart enough, even though they're massive risk takers, but they're smart enough to go, no, I think today I'm going to come back down. I'm going to just do this again tomorrow. Because the whole goal is to play again.
Yeah, right. And that comes with experience and time. And you don't know that when you're 15, 16, 17, or even 25, because you haven't had enough at-bats to know that.
And plus you haven't developed the brain.
Correct,
yet.
Yeah. So that's it. So I think that's a really good one. The risk and, qualified risks are definitely important in there as well. So let's go another option. In terms of, I'm really curious about the area, like for me, the advice I would have given to myself is, for the same reason, you were talking about a fear. I had a shyness that I actually didn't like drawing attention to myself. And so even though I like, and I was forever basically trying to fly under the radar, right? And I don't know whether it was because, being a migrant kid, I just wanted to fit in with everybody else. So I didn't want to do anything that was different. If I showed somebody up, this is where the mindset for me was that if I'm shining too much, you're going to like me less. So I'm just going to dumb this down, or I'm just going to dim my own light to make you feel better about yourself. Right. And so for the longest time, I realized that that's what I was doing. I'd have a skill set, or I'd worked exceptionally hard at achieving an outcome, and yet I'd just trivialize it and downplay and go, yeah, it's no big deal, or yeah, I was just lucky. And I think it took the toll on me for a long time, because it made me never really acknowledge, the sense of, in coaching, we always look at the factors that affect people are quite often the level of worthiness, whether they feel good enough, whether they feel loved or lovable. And for me, it was always good enough, right? It was like I had this compelling narrative around this, no matter what I did, no matter how, it wasn't good enough. And even if it was good, I'd have to just keep it quiet. So the journey for me was really about getting comfortable in my own skin and being okay with that, because eventually I got to the realization and understanding of people who appreciate you, love you, care for you, going to love you for who you are authentically, and they're the ones you want. And the old saying of the people that mind don't matter and the people that matter don't mind really was something I wish I could take back to that younger version of myself and just go, just be yourself, dude. It's all going to work out for you.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, for sure. Like I'm very similar to that. I was definitely shy, and I was like, where you brought me, it's kind of good. This is all good, right? Bring back old memories and painful memories. Yeah. I was a shy kid as well. I was the geekiest. Think of like an Asian geeky kid. Yeah. Like the nerdy geeky who wasn't actually smart, but he was nerdy looking. Yeah, that was me, right? So I was smart, but I wasn't I wasn't that smart. Like, so, I looked the part, but I didn't, I was Urkel, but not without the brains. So, man, I was brutal. And I was like, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, man, like I have literally probably burnt or removed or thrown away all high school photos of myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there is, I'm sure there is one somewhere out there that I'm going to be haunted by at some point in my life. And haven't found it yet. I think it's probably somewhere in my dad's basement somewhere in Canada. I'm going to have to go to Canada and throw those away. But really, like, I was so bad. And I remember thinking about, like, this from a partner's perspective and finding a girlfriend. I'm like, if I had to go back to my younger self in my teenage years, I'm like, it's going to be all okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. It's going to be all okay, dude. Like, you'll be fine. You just have to be a late mature and you'll figure it out. So don't trust in yourself. I think that, so the advice I would give is sort of similar to, which is like, trust in yourself, don't settle. And that was actually, that's something I actually did tell myself when I was younger. Okay. And I don't know why this is a thought, so I hope this is okay. But there was one moment in time, like I said, I was really geeky. You didn't have the looks or the body or anything like that. Right. But I've always felt that I deserved to be with an amazing woman.
Yep.
Right. But I was like, but I look at myself in the mirror like, how? Right. It's just like, that's the first thing, like, how? But I just remember, I'm like, okay, so I have two choices here, right? I lower my standard and just accept whatever that I can, feel like I can be matched at that point, or keep my standard because I'm a freaking nice guy, like that. That's why, I know with myself, I have a good heart and I'm a good person, that I should deserve, someone spectacular. And I had to make that choice. Not that I had to make a choice, but I remember I had to talk to my head. I was probably like 15, 16 at that time. And I'm like, no, like, dude, like, you just, like, people resonate with you. They just may not like you, like, from the attraction point of view, from a physical point of view, but, like, you'll figure this out. And I remember, like, okay, I'm going to keep the standard high of who I imagine my perfect, partner, girlfriend, wife will be. And just kept it, and I maintained it. And obviously I matured, changed and stuff, and and I grew, and you figured out fashion and all that stuff. My parents weren't fashionable, and I'm so glad that that's one of the things I did. I actually just told my daughter that the other day. It was kind of funny, because it's like, sometimes, like, you always have always you can lower standards, but I said sometimes it's more easier to, like, lower expectations, but always maintain your standards, because that's what's most important, because your standards is what you're trying to live up to. Expectations what destroys you, because, and there'll be another podcast elsewhere, but expectation is what destroys you, because you're constantly comparing yourself to your expectations. But standards got to be high, got to maintain them. So that's what I would give that younger version.
That's a really interesting one, because I think what happens for people when you're making big decisions and big life decisions, you've got this. It's kind of like this sliding doors moment in the movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, where you could go one way and it takes you on one trajectory, or you go on another train and it takes you on another one. And you've got that point of, if you can have reverence and clarity in those key important moments, and hindsight, you can go back and go, it was that moment, it was that moment, it was that moment, but you don't necessarily know it as you're going through it. Other than to just go do what you basically said, is just elevate and see the worth and the beauty and what you deserve in yourself, and making a choice to go, I choose to level the hell up in myself, and because of that, then I'll attract the person who basically I want to be with, as opposed to just settling for what's convenient or local. And I'm not talking about a relationship necessarily, but it's a really big factor. It's a really big factor. So many times people, that I've worked with come in and say, I'm looking for my ideal partner, and I've defined all these characteristics of exactly what this person looks like. I go, great, awesome. And what would that person be looking like for? And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, it's a two-sided thing. So who would you need to be to attract that kind of person? And by extension, that's pretty much what you've actually outlined. So you've got to do as much of a list of who I need to be and who I need to show up to attract that person into my life and world.
Exactly. That's this exact same advice I gave to one of my clients today. We're just using it as an example. I go, like, he's a younger guy, and I go, do you have a list of, like, who your perfect partner is? He goes, yeah. Give me a second. I actually wrote it. I'm like, how long did it take you? Like 3 minutes. I'm like, okay, great. And I'm like, I didn't ask him to read it to me. I go, but if you read the list, I'm like, that's great. That's something you would want to someone. But what are you doing? Yeah. Like, the first two questions. One is, if that person that did show up to your door right now, would they be attracted to you?
Yeah.
In this moment in time? And the chances are usually no. right? And then two, the second question, if that's the answer is no, then like what are you doing every day
Yeah.
to becoming better, to be that person, to even attract
Yeah.
someone like that in your
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
right? And that's exactly what you're saying. And that's, I think, from a relationship point of view, it's like, yeah, like it will come. And that's why I said, be patient, stick to your, trust yourself, like, believe in yourself, and, good things will always come.
Yeah. I guess another thing that I was going to look at as well too, sometimes when things don't go the way you planned, and this was the one where I was thinking about, what we might talk about just in the lead up to a podcast. I was thinking about I'm not sure what your music genre of preference is, Laurence. Mine's very contemporary, rap. We've got a very broad range of music I listen to, right? But there's a country music song that I heard years ago by Garth Brooks. All right,
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks, and
there was a period of time where there was one song or so that I used to, what song is it?
Unanswered Prayers. Have you actually heard?
Yeah, I love that song.
It's a brilliant song.
That's
right?
one.
Yeah,
I hate to say that I admit to like I like a country, but like that was one country song that I actually did.
Laurence, here's the funny part. This is the only country song that I know, and probably the only one that you know, and it happened to be that we both knew the same song.
Yeah,
right?
I know that song well.
Yeah, but I used to play that because a lot of the time the essence of it, and do yourself a favor, go listen to it. Get out of your own way if you don't like country. Just listen to the goddamn song, because there's magic in that. And it's basically talking about sometimes, life doesn't work out the way you want because there's probably a bigger plan. There's something else there. And thank goodness things didn't work out the way that you wanted, because it left you open for something even better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and so to me, that's what I love about that song. That's the only Garth Brooks song I know. I don't know how it came that I got to hear that song, but yeah, so let's talk about that. Have there been times where if you had gotten what you thought you wanted, your whole life would have been different?
Yeah, there's definitely moments where I think, if I got it, I think my whole life trajectory would have changed a lot, and I mean, it's kind of strange. The first thing I can think of is like certain like relationships. Like I had, a couple relationships where if it went a certain way, it went really well. Like, and then if it went a certain way, I don't know if I know that my life would nowhere be as close as where it is right now. And that would have been a disaster, and so it's, you're absolutely right. So that's the first thing I can think of. Relationship. There'll be one relationship, a couple of relationships where it's just like, it could have gone that way and it would definitely change the trajectory of my life right away. So we were just talking about universities. I applied to go to University of Toronto for physiotherapy.
Yeah.
And out of high school, and you were able to do that at the time, and I didn't get in. You needed like a 96% out of high school. I had like a 91 and I couldn't qualify, and ended up going to university. They rejected me, and I ended up going to Waterloo for kinesiology. That in itself changed the trajectory of my life. That's a sliding door moment for sure, because that's where I discovered chiropractic, and went to see a chiropractor there, and spent 4 years just trying to find myself. And that's also the same town where Karen was living in.
Yeah.
She didn't go to Waterloo, she went to McGill. But yeah, so that's what I mean, like those slow movements. Let's face it, not that physiotherapists are bad, it's a bad thing, but I think if I went down that road, there's no way I don't think I would ever end up in chiropractic.
Yeah.
Right? So it's sort of, and chiropractic has also given me an amazing career path, and sort of where I'm leading up to now. What about you?
Actually, very interesting. It must be a university thing. So I finished year 12, and I always wanted to study chiropractic for as long as I remember. And I didn't get in after year 12. I just missed the cutout, because back in the time when we studied, there were 50 people in Australia and New Zealand that could get into the course. And I didn't get in. I just missed out. So I was pretty bummed out by that. So I went to university. I went to Monash University for the first year, and just really didn't bring my right attitude. I mucked around. I was really dejected. It was something that I'd wanted to do, and I just didn't get in there. And I failed every subject in first year uni, but not badly enough that I failed the year. Badly enough that I had to repeat all my exams at summer. It was what's called a P2 fail, which is 45 to 50. So had to study for the whole year over summer, got through my exams. I went, this is not how I want to go do life again. I'm no closer to getting into chiropractic if I keep this game up. So I studied a lot and nailed it second year, and then I was transferred to chiropractic. But the interesting thing is, Bettina also finished year 12 the same year I did. And she went off to be an exchange student in Brazil for 12 months. And then when she came back, she also had the scenario, she also didn't get into chiropractic. And so she had to do a year of science, and she did exceptionally well in that year. And the 2 years that we both were going off doing other things, I am clear that life was just waiting for us to just get our acts together so that we could meet.
Yeah.
And then that like we met in the course. So I can look at it and say, yeah, we could have met, we would have met each other, whatever. But for the romantic part of me goes, dude, those 2 years, had you gotten what you wanted, it may not have turned out the way that it has. And when I look at how blessed I am, and I think that's what I hear in your voice there as well too, I look at it and go, unanswered prayers. I'm so glad it didn't work out the way that I did, because I think it opened me up and allowed me to experience a level of life and fulfillment on a level that I may not have ever had. So
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I met Karen through a girl who's friends with her when they went to high school together, who had a crush on.
Yeah.
And they were all at the same bar, and then that girl decided just to ditch us, and it was just me and Karen talking, and that's how we met.
Yeah.
So like it's those like moments, those sliding door moments are all around us every single day, and it's amazing when you reflect back and look back and how, in retrospect, of how important those moments were and what led to those moments, even for those synchronicity to occur. Is actually absolutely amazing. So let's move to, also we talked a lot about mindset. We talked about, like that. Let's move into another realm. What do you want to check? Do you want to check on physical? Do you want to talk about finance?
Whichever.
Career,
I'm happy.
Let's go finance, since you're a finance dude.
Yeah.
Let's talk about finance. What would you tell about your younger self about around finance and money?
The biggest thing for me was always about understanding the laws of finance, as opposed to, I think that's really, really important, is because what I've come to now understand is, if you understand the machinations of wealth and wealth creation and how money is created, you would value the process more than the attaining of money as well. So I think that a big thing that I'd love to share back, and in a large part I've actually done that, where I'd always say, always make decisions and choices based on your own true north, as opposed to chasing the money, because that to me is a zero-sum game. You'll get to a point where it's so short-termism that you will feel unfulfilled. And for me, I think, particularly where I am now, success and fulfillment are really important, and wealth is, to me, it's the average, or the glue that allows that process. So it's not about, to me, I'm very principle based. So even when I live my life, coach, whatever, I always rely on principles, timeless principles that have stood the test of time. And so when it comes to wealth, I'd go, understand the principles, understand what compounding does, understand that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and understand that as a process, and make really good decisions about financial discipline, so that you're effectively controlling money rather than money controlling you.
Yeah, financial discipline is definitely one thing I'll probably teach my younger self a lot sooner and earlier. I mean, I've done well in terms of creating money, creating wealth, in terms of like the work habits that I've put in. And I've done well through some, obviously investing and everything. But even then, I still feel like, now that I'm a bit older, I wish I invested earlier.
Yeah.
I wish I listened to, I wish I kind of started at a younger age. The reality is that there have been millions of dollars literally have gone through my hands, like over the years, right? And you think about how much money you've actually earned in your life.
Yeah.
There's millions that just come through, and I've spent it. It's come through and spent it. And, it's actually, I mean, to make it simplistic, is like, it's actually how much you keep.
Yeah.
As this money's coming through, it's almost like this barter of it. It's like, how much can you hold on to? That's actually going to make you wealthy at some time. So I know this is a simple analogy, but the reality is, like, if I just man, if I just invested earlier, but why didn't I? So I think back and like the reason why I didn't, and I hope that, some younger people are listening to this, is like the reason why I didn't is because I was earning great money. So I always thought that like, whatever, I'll just keep earning this amount over for the remaining part of life. I know that I'll be better 5 years from now than I am now. So like, I don't need to worry about, saving. I don't need to worry about investing because that's like worrying about retirement. That's a later on decision. It wasn't until like actually in the last few years where I'm going, you know what? I'm on this side of 50. I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
When am I going to start thinking about it? So I wish I started a lot younger. Like you said, compounding is the main thing. I just wish I understood that. I think the second thing wish I would have learned is, the younger age is value. Like what is actually money?
Yeah.
And my explanation around money now is it's actually just value.
Yeah.
Is like how much value are you putting into the world is the value that you're actually getting in return. And, that's fundamentally not chasing money. Like you said, I do agree with that. I don't like chasing money has always been a bad call for me.
Yeah.
But understanding value, money is equaling value and like looking for that. How do I create value? How to hold on to value? How do I continue doing that? And I think the money will just follow.
Yeah.
I think that's from a financial perspective, that would be one of the major things that I would definitely want to go back to.
That's a great one. And I think really how important wealth is in terms of choice. So I am grateful that I took some lessons along the way, which has allowed me, you, and our respective families have choices. So it highlights to me, that's fundamentally what the biggest important thing about wealth is that it creates choice and opportunities. And to me, if something doesn't resonate well with you, you're not bound to an environment. Like my mum and dad, and I think it hits home a lot because they were doing jobs I knew they did not want to do, but they just didn't have choice. They were stuck in an environment, and in order to provide, unskilled, without the training and the tools and resources, they just had to basically double down. And to their credit, they did exceptionally well considering that model. But I saw the anguish that it took and the toll that it took on them, and I just went, I don't want that. So to me, I always had an idea of why wealth was important, and I linked it to time with family and choice. My dad worked 7 days a week. I never saw him. And so to me, that was really important. And so for me, it was going back and saying, okay, if there was one thing that I could say to myself is I understood the value of it. I wish I had gotten better at the multiplier effect as opposed to running myself at 130% of my capacity. I probably would have asked for help earlier, and I probably would have leveraged my efforts by recruiting people earlier rather than trying to do it all by myself.
Yeah, I think it's also important to recognize, appreciate, the advice I would give to my younger self in any area, it's got to also appreciate where I was at that moment in time.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is we see enough gurus or experts to say, and especially nowadays, it's to say, listen, don't chase money, find your purpose, do what you love, that type of realm, right? But you also got to put in the context on who's saying that first, right? It's a lot easier for me to say that now than
100%.
Than I was when I was 20 years old, when I was broke and I had less than $10,000 in my, between me and Karen flying over to Australia. When you have no and little money, yeah, sure, it's nice, a nice saying and a nice thing to go approach. But when it's really important to recognize, no, in that moment, in my 20s, when it was just me and Karen with $3,000 in our bank account, going to Australia, it's no, you're gonna have to work your ass off here. This is where you got to put your, really just got to go in there and earn as much as you can, because you got a good 3 to 5 years here. If you work your butt off, that's exactly what I told myself. 27 and 32. If I put my head down and just work my butt off, I'll be in a position where I can figure things out. And, you just said about freedom, man, my advice to that younger self is like, go work your butt off. Like, do whatever it takes to earn as much as you possibly can, by creating as much value out there as possible. Because sooner or later, and I don't know how I just instinctivally knew, sooner or later, you're going to get tired. You might not lose the drive and the hunger, but there's no guarantee, right? Because right now you got all that hunger and drive. Like, you might as well leverage it. And then you have a choice. You have a choice to then go, maybe I will go and meditate on a mountain, right? Like, it's so much easier to do that. But you can't really go meditate on a mountain and do those things when you're stressed about the next bill, how I'm going to pay my taxes, or where the next meal is going to come. And so, and this is why I think it's, and the reason why I'm saying this, because I got to be careful with my kids, is to make sure, like, hey, you live a great life here, but at the same time, like, you got to work, you got to work. And I've seen this so many times with so many people, and obviously we're meeting a ton of expats, and they have the freedom to kind of live wherever. We're living in Portugal and Spain, and you're like, man, these guys, like, there's a lot of wealth, like, around the world. And you go, they get to go and play paddle and tennis or whatever during the days because they got to a point where they can do that. But it's easy to go, just do that.
So they paid their dues. They paid their dues.
They pay their dues. Exactly. And I think that's why you got to be careful. The lessons that when we're younger, listening to is like, who are you listening to? And are they giving the advice based on their age right now and the situation right now? Or are they basing it on putting your perspective on where you are at? And I think that's important. So the same thing for us. If you're listening to us, you got to put it back in perspective. I'm trying my very best to remind ourselves, like, when we were in that moment, what would you do differently? But certain things I wouldn't change.
Yeah, good point. What about, because we've covered obviously finance, mindset, career, relationships, primary relationship. I think a really nice one would be your friends and the people you associate with. So what would you say to the younger version of yourself who may, as you said, have been a kid who wasn't, looked at itself and went, how am I going to achieve this, this, and this, where I feel this about myself? What would you say to yourself about the friends?
Yeah, similar to what I said earlier, which is never compromise. Never compromise actually your own values. So I'll expand on that. I think the most important person in your life is your partner. And the reason why I fundamentally believe that is because you spent the most amount of time in your life with that person. And if you don't choose the right partner, it could be, your life is just not the same. Let's say that, right? And I find, like, choosing the right partner and being patient to make sure, and you're never going to be 100% sure, but choosing the right partner. And how I give that advice is, like, make sure you choose a partner that you can grow with. Not like just choose a partner based on who they are right now. It's someone that you got to be willing to grow with, because, I met Karen when I was 21. So we've been together for 26 years. Who we were 26 years ago is definitely not the same people as we are now, nor we were 10 years ago or 15 years ago, or so on and so forth. So I think, we have evolved together, and there are certain sacrifices and consequences and stuff that we would have to give up to be with this person. And choosing the right partner to grow with and want to grow with, I think is essential. So that would be one. But that translates just as much to your friends group. There are moments of time where you start to, I've had friends come and go in my life, of course. I'm sure everybody has. But I've always tried to choose people based on I resonate with them, in terms of my values and how I see them. However they show up, I want to make sure that I kind of surround myself with people. I don't need a lot of people in my life, but I do need certain people, key people that I know I can lean on. That, even if I haven't spoken to you in 5 years, but if I have a call and I need you, I know you have my back. Like, that's the type of people that I want to kind of surround myself with. Because 1, they obviously elevate you. 2, they give you security. But 3, they also kind of give you the feedback that you need and tell you the truth. But 4, I think they are the ones that reflect back to you how important you are in this world. I think we all need that. I think we all need that security. I think we all need that feedback. Although, we want to care less what other people think, but at the same time, in your close circle of friends, you kind of want to surround people that it's going to uplift you. People are not going to just knock you down. They're not going to they might make fun of you, but they're in truth, honestly, they love you as a person. I think those type of relationships are critical things. And we've already had a podcast around this on the 5 closest friends and how they elevate you. So you can go back to that podcast. But yeah, this is how I would choose and the importance of that. What about you?
Yeah, very similar. Very similar. I always, like you too, I've got friends who I may not have spoken to for a long time. I just pick up the phone and we start talking, and it's like time has stood still. So they're the magical ones. They're the ones that elevate you by virtue of someone's conversation or their company. You just elevate. You feel better about yourself and more inspired. So very much about those the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I think going through high school, there's a tendency to think, people like people who are like themselves. So a lot of the times, in order to fit in, you were trying to do what everybody else did. You weren't really being yourself. You're not as authentic. And I think what happens is there's a thinking that, and both my kids have experienced it recently as well, more recently than I have, where the friendships that they had at 15, 16, 17, and they thought, yeah, we're going to be friends and buddies forever, gone, because the thing that they had in common was proximity. They were there at the school, they saw each other all the time, but other than that, they may not necessarily have been the people who elevated them and allowed them and supported them with the best version of themselves. So to me, it's always, like you said, along the lines, and there's a thread, always hold yourself in high esteem and regard, elevate your own sense of worth and identity. And as a result of that, what I've realized is the people who were waiting for that version of you to show up will show up in your life and world. They're not going to be attracted to that version of yourself that may be inauthentic or not your true self. Or if they are, the moment that you change, suddenly there's going to be this conflict between that group. It's like, hey, I thought you were like this, and you're not like that, really. So that I guess the wisdom that I would pass on to myself would be, the quicker you find out who you are and be yourself and be comfortable with that, the quicker you will find the people that will love you for that version of you, and you don't have to be anything other than that. And that is, that's the journey that a lot of us have to go through, and we're looking to try and find a place where we connect and belong, and someone we love and who loves us for us.
Yeah, and I think in the same realms, like with relationship with your partner, like they tend to you want to evolve them together, like obviously, but for me, one of the lessons I learned in my life is that unfortunately, and fortunately or unfortunately, like you grow out of friendship. Sometimes a friend becomes an acquaintance, and sometimes acquaintances become closer friends, and I'm okay with that. I know it's sometimes a bit difficult, but its reality is that we might be moving in different circles, or we have different interests now, and sometimes it is just a proximity thing, and what you were like, and all these things happen, but it's not being hung up on, I have to stay friends with this person, or I have to be in this circle, or I have to be that same, because if you have to do anything, all of a sudden you still then become you actually get anchored to the old version of yourself, which you may no longer resonate with. And we got to remember, every single one of us is an individual who are growing at different speeds, and some people are growing faster and some people are growing slower, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not about, who's trying to get there faster. It's just we're just moving in different circles, and that reminder, I think, is helpful to recognize that people come in your circles and people come out of circles, and I think it's important to just be open that there's probably friendships and friends that you haven't met yet that could really change the trajectory of your life. And I think by being open to it will be a huge benefit. Yeah.
I think we've covered a lot of areas and sub areas. I'm just super curious about one thing, Laurence, that 15, 16, 17-year-old version of yourself, that same hairstyle back then or different?
Nope. No, it was it was kind of long hair. Much longer hair. Terrible. His hair was growing out of my side of my ears. I wore glasses.
Okay.
I didn't wear contacts till probably in my 30s. It was greasy. It was brutal, man. Right. It's brutal. Right. If I can find a picture, maybe I will share one day, but it was brutal. I wouldn't even date me.
Yeah, right.
It's bad. It was bad.
Well, it wasn't to just put it on you there. It was more just I was thinking to myself, yeah, no, my hairstyle hasn't changed. If it makes you feel any better, there was a time where I had shoulder length hair, Laurence. And
Wow.
yeah, I know that takes a bit of imagining, doesn't it? Especially when there's not a follicle on the head now. But yeah, that was back, shoulder length hair back there. So
Yeah, like sometimes it's just, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like when you look back and go like, how on earth did my friends or my parents ever let me walk out the door like that? Right. So I was just lucky I actually went to an all boys school. I was just lucky I went to an all boys school where I had to wear uniform for about 5 years, so I didn't have to worry about too much about fashion styles. But yeah,
that'll help.
Yeah. Any lasting thoughts of like what what would be one more little advice that you would give to your younger self before we go?
Enjoy the journey more. It's enjoy the moments, the good moments, the tough moments. It can't always be happy and exciting, and just appreciate that some of the hardest, toughest moments of your life will quite often be the biggest learnings, the biggest lessons, and the things in hindsight you may be most grateful for.
Yeah, I think for me it would be similar to that. Enjoy the journey is like, I would just, if I can only say one sentence or like just one short thing, because it's just a moment in time, because you can only go back for like just one split second, I would just love to just go, it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, I think if I reflect back, if I was young and I heard that and I knew that was my future self and I can just trust that voice.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I would do all those things I just said. I'll probably have taken more risk and I would have done, because you just know like you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And so before we leave this podcast, I'd love to kind of post this question. I know I mentioned this to you on the messenger, but like post this question. We don't have to answer it because I feel like this would be a totally different, another hour of podcasting if we ever did this. But I think it would be worthwhile for every listener, viewer watching this on YouTube or Facebook or, on our podcast channels, is to kind of think about, like, we've been talking about our current self talking to our younger self. What would happen if you were the person, your future self, your older version of you is coming back to give you advice? What kind of advice they would give you, right? So ponder that. I'd love you to think about it because, and then the second part of that question, part B, would be, what would you change, in your current life right now? What actions would you take or not take based on that advice? So that's hope that you enjoyed this particular episode. Please share this with the other people that you feel will get a lot of benefit from the Wabi Sabi podcast. And until next time, we'll see you on the next episode of Wabi Sabi.